Thank you very much. And now we're going to move to the C-Team presentation.
Okay.
So Pam, are you introducing?
At this point, I'm actually going to turn the microphone over to Tim Scanlon, our Assistant Principal for Curriculum Instruction, because Tim has been part of the inspiration and the driving force to get this program developed and to work with the collaborative team that you're going to meet tonight. And so, Tim, why don't you introduce the team?
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Kevin and Pam, and to the board for having us here tonight to do the presentation. I just wanted to say a few things before I bring up the members of the team and also our partners from the zoo. And there's a lot of people who want to talk a little bit about the C-Team tonight. I think it's kind of like preaching to the choir. I know you all appreciate student achievement. I know you all appreciate academic excellence, and I think the C-Team has represented that for a long time. So what we're about to talk about tonight maybe will be of course moment instead of an aha moment. Of course we appreciate that, and of course we want that to continue. But I guess you don't know really what you have until you lose it. And we lost the C-Team this year because of economic reasons and understandable austerity measures that had to be taking place here at the school. And we're hoping to get it back again next year. So tonight's an opportunity to talk a little bit about what the C-Team does, and also maybe to affirm, what you already know, that it's a very dynamic force. I think when we started the C-Team, we had 4 essential elements in mind that we wanted to have in place if the team became real, not just an idea. One of those was interdisciplinary teaching. We thought that was essential for not only for kids to make connections with their learning, but also essential for kids to have increased and deeper learning of other different subject areas. And we were able to accomplish that with the C-Team. The other thing that we had hoped to accomplish, or was essential, was a partnership with a world-class organization. We have an environmental education and steward leader that lives right next door to us, the Brookfield Zoo, and we were able to accomplish that partnership with the C-Team. The other thing we had hoped to bring to our kids and bring to RB was experiential education. Not just education that was theoretical, not just education that was book learning or classroom learning, but education that was applicable, and education that allowed students to take the background knowledge they've acquired and to use it in real-life problem-solving situations. And again, we thought we accomplished that with the C-Team. And I think the last essential element of the C-Team was responsibility and citizenship. We hope to produce a group of, through the C-Team, enhance a group of students' sense of responsibility to the global environment, especially as it related to environmental education, and see themselves as stewards. Not stewards that were bent to one direction or another, but stewards with problem-solving abilities to be able to go in the future and make the future. And that was what our hopes were. And I think that as you listen to some of the accolades and some of the accomplishments and some of the hopes of the C-Team from the people, the practitioners, you'll see that I think that those have been somewhat accomplished, and if I can say so modestly, on behalf of the people that did the work. So let me introduce the people that did the work. The first group of people that are going to come up are the actual C-Team teachers themselves, and I'll let them introduce themselves individually. And then I'll come back at the end to wrap up if you have any questions.
Okay. Thanks, Tim.
Could you do me a favor if you're going to do a presentation, shut the lights off?
I'm sorry.
Can you turn the lights off because you're going to do a presentation?
I made a mistake. The first presentation is going to be Alejandro. Yeah, Alejandro. First presentation is going to be representatives from the Chicago Zoological Society, Alejandro Grajal.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. I'm Dr. Alejandro Grajal. I'm with Senior Vice President for Conservation and Education at the Chicago Zoological Society. It's a pleasure for me to address this board. Thanks for the invitation for the RB High School to present our great partnership. We're really proud about it. My first presentation is a little bit about how we're going to change the slides here. You change them. It's a little bit of framing because we will present you with a detailed report on what the results of the program have been. At this moment, I want to put it in the context of what the national priorities are. So the first one is that only a national average of 15% of the undergraduate students in the US are majoring in science and engineering. This is compared to 47% in France, 50% in China, and 67% in Singapore. On the top two graphs, you have the results of the National Science Foundation Science Assessment that they do every year. And for 2008, you can see the graph compared the European Union with Japan, Asia, and China on the number of researchers per ratio of population. You can see the big pink and blue lines coming up after 2002 into 2008, and those are basically Asia and China. Those are the numbers of researchers and engineers that are graduating per number of inhabitants in each one of the countries. The US is the blue line in the bottom, that's horizontal almost. That also has a huge economic impact. One of the big exports of the US is high-tech, and these are the numbers of exports as a ratio of the national gross domestic product of the US versus several other countries, and you can see the blue line in the bottom, which is the United States, compared to China, Asia, and several of the other tiger economies in Asia, and the European Union. This is the reflection of the impact of poor performance in science and engineering in national productivity. The next slide is another piece of information. In 2008, there was a national survey of science teachers in Illinois trying to ask what are the major needs that science teachers in Illinois require. And one of the top questions was answered by teachers ranking scientific inquiry as the highest priority for the professional development. This is no accident because actually there is a new national science education standards that will come into place in 2015, and this book that is, I have the cover here, the Framework for K-12 Science Education, is the newest report on the National Academies by the National Research Council on the Framework for Science Education, which is attempting to develop international standards for science education in 2015. The framework, I'm just quoting two from the summary, from the executive summary of the framework, and says, too often science standards are a long list of disconnected facts, a mile wide and an inch deep. The second one is that current approaches neglect student engagement in science and engineering. The framework actually calls for 3 dimensions in science education. The first one is practices in science, which is asking questions, planning investigations, analyzing data, constructing explanations, discussing evidence, and presenting that information, which is what we call scientific inquiry, in other words. The second one is cross-cutting concepts, basically using interdisciplinary approaches, learning to use patterns, mechanisms, scales, proportions, energy, and matter flows. That is very different from the traditional approach, which is disciplinary, say in physics, biology, mathematics, chemistry, and so on, but actually looking at all these patterns as unified approaches to science education. And the bottom one is core ideas on 4 major axes. The first one in the physical sciences, the second in the life sciences, the third in the earth sciences, and the fourth in the engineering and technology area. These are going to be the top priorities for science education in the next few years for the US. What I'm trying to bring with this framework for science education is that this is almost what the description of the C program has been from the very beginning. One of the most amazing discoveries for both, I think, RV High School and for us as a institution was to try to come out with these outcomes on developing, as Tim Scanlon mentioned, really participatory science learning. If you understand what the C program has been doing is basically taking this framework, which is just announced of July of this year for application in 2015, and RV High School started practicing this in 2005 when the program was implemented, for planning in 2004. So this school has been years ahead of national standards, basically a decade ahead of national standards, in developing cross-cutting concepts and making the emphasis on core ideas in the life sciences, earth sciences, engineering, and technology. So with that context, I'll just leave it to the rest of the team to really present the data of these results, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them too. Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jen Waldock, and I'm the math teacher on the C team, and I've been with it since the beginning in 2005. So I've taught, I had taught on the team for all 6 years of its existence.
Hi, I'm Dan Mankoff. I'm the English teacher on the team. I've taught on it for 3 years, so I was kind of the newcomer to the team.
I'm James Holt. I'm a biology teacher, was biology teacher on the C team from the beginning. I hope you don't mind if I don't sit down. I guess I feel more comfortable standing up. Piggybacking off what Mr. Scanlon and Dr. Grahal were talking about, in terms of opportunities and experiences, not to mention the interdisciplinary part and the classroom part, which Mr. Mankoff is going to discuss more about, we feel as though we have provided students with a number of real-world experiential learning opportunities. We feel like we've given them the opportunity to take what is being discussed in the issues and topics within textbooks and traditional learnings, but giving them an opportunity to apply it and giving them more meaning as far as what the education is and a better understanding. The opportunities that the zoo has provided for us are just, I don't know if you can place value on them. Whether it's the different courses that we've participated in with water quality courses and giving students an opportunity to learn more of the value in terms of our local watersheds and impacts on those, the inquiry courses to really enhance some of those critical thinking skills and the opportunities for these students to be able to take a look at, not just from a scientific standpoint, but taking a look at what they're seeing on the television, what they're reading in newspapers and magazines, and dissecting it and try and figure out the meaning of that and what is valid, what isn't valid, and giving them the ability and the tools to be able to explore these topics and issues for themselves and develop their own critical thinking skills. The various other opportunities, just tremendous. Getting to meet with Dr. Tom, the head veterinarian at the zoo, and discuss zoonotic diseases, and we had the presentation a couple of years ago, and 2 weeks later the H1N1 virus outbreak is occurring, and he continued to be a resource for our students. He's a leader in zoonotic diseases, and having an opportunity to work with real-world scientists and professionals is just a valuable experience. Panel discussions to give students an opportunity to see potential for down the road in terms of the wide variety of different experiences that they could have from jobs and whatnot. Our environmental literacy conference that we hold at the end of each year over at the zoo, where the students present on various different environmental issues. For a freshman student to be able to construct a 20 to 25-minute presentation with visual arts components, with an active component, and for them to stand up in front of an audience that they don't know is very empowering for them. These are skills that most of the freshman students were not getting an opportunity to develop, and to take oftentimes freshman students who are young, shy, bashful, maybe afraid to stand up and talk about something in front of a group like that, and to give them an opportunity to enhance those skills and really feel empowerment, feel like they have an opportunity to have a voice and to make a difference. On top of all the stewardship opportunities, the restoration project with the Oak Savannah that we've put in, I don't know how many hours of work with them and the staff, and having an opportunity to gain a better understanding of not only ecosystems and native species, invasive species, but to really see it firsthand and to have an opportunity to make a difference. We've had an opportunity to partnership with a number of organizations, Pure Prairie Organics, Golden Guernsey, Scarce, Trout Unlimited, the Great Lakes Alliance. These kids have just had an opportunity to be exposed to so many opportunities and get the opportunity to see so many issues, but more so to be a part of it and not just sit in the classroom and talk about it, but to have them to be able to get out there and get their hands dirty and get an opportunity to feel as though they can make a difference and they can see that they're making a difference. And that's just something that we as teachers have found to be so powerful and so rewarding. And to see the students' sense of accomplishment at the end of it has just been amazing for us. So,
I have about 3 minutes to kind of communicate what's been meaningful about the C team to me, and it's not hardly enough. I'm pretty gratified to see all the faces of C team parents and alum who came out tonight, and I hope they share some of their stories at visitor comments, because I know, the stories that have been most meaningful and impactful to me, they'll have their own stories too. I guess the best way I could describe, what C team has meant to me and to students is to say I taught 12 years of freshman English before I entered the team. So I've seen kind of what it's like to have that freshman experience outside the team and within the team. And one thing I've done as an English teacher every year is I try to communicate the idea of active reading to students. How to read with an open mind, an inquiring mind, how to engage in a short story or a novel or a poem. And it never works, because students will always say, well, what does the story mean? Give me the answer. Tell me what it means. What I found out was that there's a better answer to that I saw through C-Team, and it actually came about because of a woods walk that we took. One of the things that we do early in the year is we take the students out to Kiwanis Woods. We walk them down, and they do a woods walk where they have their field guides and their sketchbooks, and they take a look at what's out there in the woods. They're jotting down sketches and notes about native species and invasive species and wildlife and ecosystem. And then they come back and we meet as a whole group, and essentially Mr. Holt runs it as a science activity where he asks them what they observed. And he, kind of being a hunting hobbyist, riffs off of some of their ideas and explains other things they might have missed and not noticed, and where the deer kind of walk in the forest. And I remember vividly coming out of that experience and going into my English class and teaching a short story like I always do. And the kids are saying, well, what does it mean? And that was the point at which I said, here's an opportunity with C-Team where I said, when you walked out into the forest, last hour, you didn't go into the forest and say, what does the forest mean? There's no answer to the forest. You didn't go out there looking for a hidden meaning. What you did was inquiry. You went out there and you looked and you observed and you took notes and you did sketches and you looked for patterns and connections. And I said, it's the same thing when you read a story, except instead of noticing a native species, you're noticing a metaphor, or the way a paragraph is structured, or an image, or a word choice. And that to me is kind of the power of C-Team, because it takes an idea like inquiry, and it says this is not just scientific method in biology class. It is also the structure where you solve a problem in a math class, and it's also the structure where you interpret a poem, or you look at a short story, or you analyze a novel in an English class. And then the added power to that is within the next day or two of C-Team, we were back out there in the woods, having taken their observations that they made, and we said, now we want you to do that inquiry model. Now that you've looked and you've seen what's out there, we want you to ask some questions. And we want you to go and do that experimental model to kind of measure your questions. So we had kids out there with their compasses and their thermometers and their rain gauges and their rulers and yardsticks, and they were out there measuring, why do the trees grow higher on this side of the river than that side of the river? Or why are the mosquitoes thicker over here than they are over here? Why does the river flow faster or slower? And that's that's what C-Team means. It means you see this in each and every classroom. You see how this idea of inquiry flows across all of these academic disciplines. And then you see it in the real world, based on an experience that you've designed and you've created and you get your hands in the middle of. And you draw that connection where it's not just learning within the classroom, but it goes beyond the boundaries of the classroom. And it leads to something like that environmental learning conference at the end of the year, where you say, now we want you to move beyond an academic exercise of measuring how tall a tree grows to an exercise like, how do I inspire somebody to build a raised bed garden in their backyard instead of buying a vegetable that came from 1,000 miles away? How do I inspire somebody to buy a more energy efficient car? How do I inspire somebody to change the kinds of food that they eat? And that's kind of what the whole motive of C-Team is about. And actually, the nice thing that we found out too, based on Dr. Puche's research, which she's going to share with us in a moment, is that it has some real measurable academic benefit as well that kind of matches up with the anecdotal evidence that we have. So with that, I'll share Dr. Puche.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here. and I'm going to tell you who I am, what did I do, and the results. So I am an adjunct professor at the University of Illinois in Chicago, and in addition to my PhD, I'm pursuing a master's on environmental and inquiry education. So towards that end, I participated in the C program for several weeks last year, and my goal was to evaluate the impact of environmental education on the students. So what is important to understand is that the aim of environmental education is to shape human behavior and promote responsible citizenship. Therefore, an environmentally responsible citizen is one that has awareness, sensitivity, and basic understanding of environmental problems. It has feelings of concern and motivation for actively participate in environmental problems and their solutions, skills in identifying and solving the environmental problems, and active involvement towards the resolution of those problems. So taking that into account, I developed a study to evaluate if the C students are aware, sensitive, and understood the environment, if they felt concerned about the environment, if they have the skills and to identify and solve an environmental problem, and if they had begun to actively participate in solving environmental problems compared to students that were not in the program. So for that, I designed a survey that was distributed among 817 students at RB. Of those, 157 were in the C team, or in the program. 57 were participating actively in the program that year, and the sophomores, juniors, and seniors had been in the program when they were freshmen, and there were 616 non-C students. So the first thing that I asked them was if they liked the program, and they had to use a scale between 1 to 5, where 1 indicated not liking it at all, and 5 indicated that they liked it very much. So as you can see here, about 110 students, which is about 80% of the students, chose 4 and 5, which is an indication that they liked it a lot. Then I asked what factors were instrumental in developing your attitude toward toward nature. And so here you can see the proportion of choices for each of these categories: outdoors, family, study, books, place of origin, or C team. The green bars are going to be the C team, the blue bars are the non-C team. So as you can see, for example, here, the C team considered that 80% of the students considered that going outdoors was a way to have an attitude, a good attitude toward nature. But 70% of them considered that the C team was responsible for that attitude. So this is very important for this type of program. The other categories decreased among them, and it was the same response in the non-C students. Then in the following questions, those questions had several statements, and I asked the students to rank those statements in a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 meant I do not agree with that statement at all, and 5 meant I agree with that statement very much. The expected answer was 5. Therefore, the average, if it is closer to 5 or if it is higher, is a better answer. So the first was to evaluate what was the influence of family on the students. So I asked the students how often, as children, they hiked or played in the woods, collected nature objects, planted a garden, went camping, bird watching, hunting, or fishing, or they read books about animals or nature. And I was not able to detect any significant differences between the C and the non-C students. This is important because if there's any difference between the C and the non-C students, the reason is going to be the C program. It's not going to be the influence of family on their attitudes and responses. The next question was to evaluate if the goals of the C program were or they're fulfilled according to the students. So here you can see the average scores for the C and the non-C students, and the stars indicate that significantly higher scores were obtained for the C and compared to the non-C students. The C students were more confident about analyzing and interpreting information by developing their own data collection plan. They were more happier for participating in current event discussions. They felt that they were more in contact with nature. They were prouder of creating their own inquiry project, and they felt that they have worked in service projects more than the non-C students. The next question was used to evaluate how they were connected to nature, and this is important because if you feel more connected to nature, then you feel that you have to solve and protect nature. So of the 20 items that I asked, significantly more were higher for the C students compared to the non-C students. So it means that they are more connected to nature than the non-C students. This question was used to evaluate self-esteem and empowerment among the students. Empowerment variables are important because they give a sense to the students that they can make changes and help resolve important environmental issues. So the average scores were significantly higher for the C students compared to the non-C. They felt that the teachers accepted their ideas, that they were encouraged to visualize their own thinking, they collaborated more, helping learn new ideas, that they were able to identify new questions, which is important for the inquiry process, and they felt that they have more experience recording their own data compared to the non-C students. This question was used to evaluate how were their skills to identify environmental problems, and the C students were, had higher scores, significantly higher scores than the non-C students. And then finally, the last question was used to determine if they were working towards the resolution of environmental problems, if they were active. So I asked them to rank how much they were into recycling, carpooling, buying organic products, participating in cleanups or wildlife restoration, using green products, saving water by turning it off, or saving energy by turning off lights. And significantly higher scores were obtained for the C students compared to the non-C. So in conclusion, the C students like the program. The C program is responsible for the students' attitude toward nature. A family does not have a detectable effect on environmental attitudes. The goals of the C program were reached. The C students are more connected to nature. The C students feel more empowered than the non-C students. The C students have better skills to identify and resolve environmental problems. The C students are more environmentally active than the non-C students, and therefore the C program has a stronger potential to create responsible citizens compared to the traditional education. Thank you.
Well, just to wrap up and to see if you have any questions, thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk a little bit about the program. I think one of the strengths of the program is that we have, like I said, quite a world-class organization right next door, and our kids, make it a baseball analogy, we get to go over and take batting practice with Ted Williams and Babe Ruth every day over there in the environment. And if you're going to do batting practice with Ted Williams and Babe Ruth, I think you're going to improve your batting average quite a bit. And you're going to have a great example. And we have an environmental giant next door, and they invited us in to be partners with them. And I think the kids embraced it. The teachers certainly did. And they also embraced the interdisciplinary model, which is paid off quite a bit in outcome and also in a sense of purpose of education. So, thank you. Any questions, ma'am?
Any questions?
Tim, just for the record, not being here last year, the administration recommended last year to put the program on hold because of the number of students that requested it during course registration.
Oh, it's a combination. We would typically have a lower number at the beginning of registration, and then that number would build as the school year, as the summer progressed on. But the C team also had other financial factors attached to it, so it became an equity issue. As we were cutting back on the other classes, was it fair to run classes that would be probably a little bit lower typically, but also would require other financial commitments, and that was just, it was inequitable. There was an inequity there, and we just couldn't do it.
And I know we've had some brief conversations on this, and just want to sort of bring the board up to speed. We're looking at alternative ways in the event if the C team were to run to eliminate some of those expenditures out of district funds, or at least minimize them to offset some of that, correct?
Absolutely. In fact, the team has evolved, and to the point where some of the expenses are no longer necessary. For example, supplies. We're well supplied now. We had to do startup supplies when we first started the team and replenish that and make sure that we're in a place. So there'll always be some usable supplies and perishable supplies that we'll need, but we have more supplies now. Secondly, we used to have a liaison that was a member of the, an employee of the zoo, and that liaison position, although we would prefer it and we think it enhances the program, given you know, the necessity of austerity, we'll do without the liaison. And the zoo is, like some of the other organizations that partner with us, has graciously said that they'll stay partnering us with or without the liaison. The last thing that we changed next year will be the environmental enrichment period, which was the last period of the day that we used for enhancing projects and for fulfilling the environmental option of the team, the environmental focus of the team, excuse me. And I think that we prefer that. However, they're more fleet, they're more skilled, and they know their job. They've been doing it for a long time, and we can make up for that time loss by blocking the classes, 4 classes in a row, and with PE, English, science, and math. So we think that we don't think we'll miss a step. We're anxious to get the team back. It's there's only 2 interdisciplinary classes we have here, or programs we have here. This was one of the 2. I think that when the Chicago Wilderness allowed us to become a member, we were the first high school in the region to become a member of the Chicago Wilderness Consortium. I think that said a lot about where the program was going, and the commitment that the teachers had and the opportunity. So we've come a long way. We've got some outside recognition, and we'd like to get back. We haven't abandoned it totally, but we'd like to get back to it at full force. Does that answer your question, Kevin?
Yeah, and the one last thing, and we've talked about this a little bit in some of our curriculum meetings with Pam and Tim, is as we look at our operational expenditures and we begin to discuss classes, class offerings, class sizes, this is obviously a great program. And being a new person to Riverside Brookfield, I think this is a dynamic program that offers outstanding opportunities to the students of Riverside Brookfield High School. On top of that, though, so the board understands it, is it's 4 classes. So the way you would want to treat this operationally is you'd want to have a similar class size for 4 classes. So what we need, student enrollment or selection in this, and this is almost a little bit of a recruiting for the C team. The students need to, it's a need versus a want. If we have a large population of students that want C team and sign up for C team during the course selection process, and it creates a consistent class size to what the other class size averages would be set in the other content areas, it would be okay operationally to offer such a class. I think that's where you kind of ran into a little bit of an issue last year, is that the original selection process didn't have the large amount of students to warrant the 4 teachers being assigned to that amount of students.
That and the finances, yeah, it just was, as I said, not, what wouldn't have been fair to the overall school and everybody else to give them so much and take away from so many other people. And I did forget, and you alluded to it, Kevin, that we also, last year, a student, a freshman, picking the C team would have had to pick environmental enrichment as an elective. Now we've eliminated that as an option for the students, or as a conflict in many cases. And now that the 4 classes that they take are freshman required classes anyway. So being on the C team doesn't mean you have to give up anything any longer. You don't have to take that environmental enrichment class. We'll get that environmental enrichment built into the block. We'll use the class time strategically. We'll use that block of time creatively, and allow all the other elements of the C team, the goals of the C team, to be realized, but in a different model.
And I think that speaks volumes of where we're heading as a district is they're passionate enough to find a way to pull this off with a different approach, some creativity, and yeah, I want to applaud the teachers and Mr. Scanlon and Pam for sitting down and coming up with this, and hopefully enough students sign up for it that we'll have the staffing to meet the request.
Well, any questions for Tim?
Yeah, I have one.
Tim?
Yeah, Tim. About what percentage of students had to drop out of consideration for C team because of conflict? You just mentioned one recommendation for change that might obviate that as a problem, but I know 2 students in particular who would have been involved in the C team were it not for the fact that they were driven to take honors classes that precluded them being involved with the course of study for C team.
I don't know who the number of kids that weren't on the C team because of conflicts. I don't know that. I can say anecdotally that was a common occurrence. Student and sometimes in music, students in other electives, or students who wanted to take an honors course that environmental enrichment was not an honors offering, weren't able to, were opted out. Now we have an honor. We've always had, but we still have an honors option for the 3 main academic components of the course. There's no honors for PE, so that I don't know that. I could find out if you'd like. It would take some digging, but anecdotally, there was definitely kids that didn't join the team who wanted to because of they had one elective. We still had a robust team and had a good number of kids, but yeah, there's always those kids that couldn't do it because of that.
Well, this gives RB awesome uniqueness. And I got the feeling that we were the only district in the state that has this, but you mentioned some other members of the consortium. How many other schools are
There's,
involved?
I believe, 3 other high schools who have followed our lead, I like to say that, who have followed our lead and have been accepted as members of the consortium. I think it's Deerfield and Lincoln Way East, I want to say. Maybe it could be Central. I'm no longer the rep for RB. The teachers are now the rep for the, I had to pass on to
But without the
something
advantage
else.
of world-class zoo and proximity.
It's nice having the Chicago Zoological living next door. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
And I really probably can't thank them enough. When we walked over there one day and said, hey, we had an idea, the door flew open and the welcome was continual, ongoing, and gracious. So.
Thank you.
Tim?
First thing, never done it before, I'll try and see if my fellow, I'm speaking for myself, but I think there's a misconception in one thing you said, Tim.
Okay.
And I don't think it's purposeful. But the main reason that program was cut wasn't when I was discussing and voting, was not the fee. I recollect there was about 45 kids signed up for it. Isn't that about the number? And there was 4 or 5 sections, and we would have had class size of about 11 students. So you can solve, you know, it was a nice presentation. You know, I had a kid in it. I had one thing I thought Dan was going to say, one thing that would help it, and you talked about math, if kids are in advanced math, they can't be on the C team, or they have to take advanced math and lower level math. So if there's a way to roll in one section of higher level math so that those kids have a chance to do it, that might attract more. But the other thing is, we're going to discuss later on in this meeting about having a minimum class size policy of 20. And you'd have to bring it to us and vote on. Everybody who's here, if you want the C team, get 80 kids to sign up. Because then we're meeting the minimum. We can't expect, if there's 45 when we're approving the budget next year, we can't, I don't think in good conscience, say, well, maybe we'll get 35 more over the summer. So this is what we asked Pam and Kevin to do is, what's your plan, not to tell us about it, to tell the 8th graders in our 3 feeder schools, so you get at least 80 kids signed up, so you have 20 kids in a section, and in theory, you know, you could probably take 120 kids or something, because I think the board would have supported it this year, even with the $10,000.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. Last year was a different year in that we had the referendum having passed, we had a shorter window to make a decision, and you're absolutely correct. At that moment in time, we didn't have the luxury to hope.
Right.
we had to make a hard decision. So you're right. If it was the years before where there was a little bit more fund balance to float the hope, we could have floated it a little bit longer. But you're right. At that moment in time, there was we couldn't bank on hope. We had to hit the hard reality of numbers and finance.
And I think we agonized over that. But
Oh, gosh.
So everybody who's here, my suggestion, go talk to the 8th grades, go talk to the schools, get 80 kids to sign up, and I would guess there'd be pretty big support from the board to continue the program.
We are in the 8th grades. We're going to Comarc tomorrow. We were at Gross last week, and then the 29th we'll be at Hauser and presenting this elective option. But it's actually 60 kids, because the PE class, there'll be 60 kids from the other 3 that will go down, so 60 is enough.
Okay, any other questions for Tim or the C team? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.